Why does the average person think you're lying about your handicap?
A handicap index isn't about what you usually shoot. It's based on your demonstrated ability, what you're capable of on a good day.
What's the reasoning for basing the handicap index on potential instead of average?
If we did look at it at an average, it would actually reward the inconsistent player.
So we heard that a max score that you can receive on a hole is a net double bogey.
On holes with stroke index 11 through 18, your max is just a double bogey.
Can you post 9-hole scores for that to be considered for your handicap index calculation?
Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we have the USGA with us, and we are going to be discussing why do golfers always look like they're lying about their handicaps, and we're going to go over the top 10 things you didn't know about the handicap system with Lee Rainwater. Lee, thanks for coming on the channel.
Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate you having me. Glad to be here and happy to help talk through the top 10 questions to debunk some myths.
Yeah, and if you could just give the viewers a quick kind of like insight into who you are and why we're talking to you about this.
I work with the USGA Handicap and Course Rating Department. I've been on the team for a little over 11 years, and before that, I worked with the Louisiana Golf Association. So really, all I've done is work in golf. My role currently is a lot on education, working with allied golf associations here in the U.S., making sure that they and authorized golf clubs and golfers understand the rules of handicapping, how a handicap works, how it could add enjoyment to the game. And we're also trying to do a better job of conveying the benefits of having a handicap. So more and more golfers who are out playing, once a month, twice a month, hopefully see the benefits and sign up and are posting their scores and using them to compete with their buddies or go out and play in the league or a tournament. We want to make sure that everybody knows that if you're playing golf and you're keeping score, then the handicap is for you.
Yeah, for sure. We're excited to kind of dive into some of these questions. And with that being said, let's get into it and kind of start with question number one, which is kind of the most basic, but I feel like most important question is, can you just explain to us in depth how exactly a handicap index is calculated?
I think a really important concept that you really need to know to understand how a handicap index is calculated is the score differential. And what a score differential is, basically when you go out and play golf and post a score, that score gets converted into a score differential. And it really just takes into account how tough the golf course was using the course rating and slope rating. And it allows for every time you go out and play, it allows for those performances to be compared against one another. So once you've got the full scoring record, the 20 scores, the system averages your 8 best score differentials. And then for most of the time, that average becomes your handicap index. I certainly could stop there, but there are a couple of safeguards built into the calculation, and we get plenty of questions about these at the USGA that I feel it's important to at least provide a high-level overview. First safeguard is called an exceptional score reduction. And really what, the term kind of explains exactly what it is. If you post a score that has a score differential that's at least 7 strokes better than your handicap index, there's going to be an automatic reduction. And that can either be 1 or 2 strokes depending on how exceptional that round was. The second safeguard that's built into the calculation is called a cap. So if we take that 8 of 20 average and we compare it to a low handicap index over the last year, if that new average is more than 3 strokes above that low point, a cap then kicks in to slow down how fast your handicap can rise. This was put into place with the World Handicap System back in 2020, and it's really in place to help prevent a big jump in a handicap over a relatively short period of time. And essentially having a number that doesn't represent the game that you have shown within the last 12 months. And it's in place too to protect the field, to make sure that you don't have a handicap that's high and you essentially have a better chance at winning or placing than everybody else in the field.
Based on what we just talked about, why does the average person think you're lying about your handicap?
This probably goes without saying, but I think it's important to keep in mind that some golfers are really consistent and other golfers are not. And that,
oh my gosh.
yeah. But so typically what we see is someone that's really steady, so that 79 to 85 shooter, no one's really going to question their handicap. But the thing is, a handicap index isn't about what you usually shoot. It's based on your demonstrated ability, what you're capable of on a good day. If you've played to that level 40% of the time, so 8 out of 20, that's a strong indicator of what you can do on the golf course. It's totally normal for a high handicap golfer to post a score that's 3 strokes, 5 strokes, 8 strokes above their handicap on a given day. It does not mean they're lying about their handicap. It means that golf is hard, and consistency does vary from player to player.
Sweet. So I love those answers. So just to dive a little further into that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, so basically your last 20 rounds, we're taking your best 8. But what that means is, like, if we think of the median of 1 through 8, right, that's 4.5. So like basically you're only going to shoot what your handicap number is or better, like every 4.5 out of 20 rounds. Is that a good way to look at it?
Pretty accurate. We've traditionally said for most golfers, you're going to play to your handicap 1 out of every 4 to 5 rounds. That's pretty normal.
I think that's the big thing, right? So for people who don't understand it, a lot of people think handicap means average. Really, you need to see someone, play with someone 5 times to see if they're lying about their handicap or not, because like it's rare to do it. Like people might even think it's 40% of your rounds, but it's not. To hit that handicap number or better, it's like 1 every 4 or 5, like you said, right?
Absolutely. We do get the question from time to time about if whether a handicap is based on all 20 or why it's not based on all 20, and it kind of goes back. I've said it probably 3 times already that it's demonstrated ability that we're looking at potential. And if we did use a pure average of your most recent 20 score differentials, it would really reward the inconsistent golfer. You could see a situation where golfer goes out and has a couple of really good rounds. They go out and have a couple of rounds where they just blow up. That golfer would essentially have an advantage over someone that is a little bit more steady.
So is that why you would say like it's not just the median or the average? I get why you wouldn't do the average, but why, like, is that also the reason you wouldn't do like the median scores?
Yeah, I think ultimately it goes back to we want to know like how good of a golfer are you on your better day. So we really like, if we only looked at the median, we'd be cutting out really good information about how good you are when you are playing well. If we handle the calculation in another way, it brings in more variability, volatility, giving some players perhaps more of an advantage than others, just kind of based on their player profile to get you to a level where you can have those fair games with your friends.
The slope rating is how much harder or easier is that course for a bogey golfer. Would that be correct? So like what's the average slope rating?
Well, the standard slope that we use is 113. The average slope rating is probably closer to like 120. But I think the way you described it is good. Behind the scenes, there's also a bogey rating, and the bogey rating essentially evaluates how difficult a golf course is for a bogey golfer. What we do with slope is we take those two values, and the farther apart they get, the higher the slope rating gets. So the higher the slope rating gets, the more strokes the lesser skilled golfer needs to create that fair game.
So it's essentially like a graph. So like, let's say we have a course that's rated 72. So course and slope rating. The course rating is like what a scratch golfer on their good days would shoot. Let's say course rated 72. If a scratch golfer on a good day shoots a 72, a bogey golfer on a good day shoots a 90? Yeah, shoots a 90, then the slope rating would be 113. But if a bogey golfer was to shoot, let's say 95 or 100 on a good day at this course, then the slope rating would be higher. Is that kind of how it works?
When you go out and play against someone, you're going to take the handicap index, and that's actually going to be converted to a course handicap. So the handicap index is great because it's portable. It can go with you from course to course and tee to tee. But as soon as you pick the course and the tee that you're going to play, we're going to convert that handicap index to a course handicap. And that's really where slope rating comes in. The higher that slope rating, the more strokes that the lesser skilled golfer is going to need in order to keep up with the better golfer. The higher the slope rating basically means that, a lot of it's going to be driven by the length of the course, but it also could mean, the width of the fairways, the out of bounds that comes into play, any forced carries are pretty huge. The difficulty of the putting surfaces, like the more of those obstacles that come into play, all of which impact the bogey golfer more than they impact the scratch golfer, the higher the slope rating is going to get, and the more strokes the higher handicap index golfer is going to get to try to create a fair game.
Right. So it's like the slope rating is basically like if there's things that are difficult about the course that a scratch golfer is good enough where like it doesn't really affect them, but for a bogey golfer, it's going to like it's going to really mess them up, basically.
Exactly.
So we heard that a max score that you can receive on a hole is a net double bogey. Is this true, and is this handicap then still legit with this into consideration?
Yeah, so within the rules of handicapping, we have a max score that can be recorded for handicap purposes. We don't call it a cap. Obviously, there's a cap within the handicap index calculation, but there is a max score for handicap purposes. So if a golfer goes out and blows up on one hole or on two holes, the max hole score, we call it net double bogey. It essentially keeps that hole from diluting an otherwise good performance. I already mentioned that when you go out and you pick a course and you pick a set of tees, that you get your course handicap, and that course handicap is key in determining your net double bogey limit. You need three things to determine your net double bogey limit. You need the course handicap, you need the par of the hole, and you need the stroke index value. And that term may be a little bit elusive, but it's the handicap row on the scorecard. So just an example of how it works is, let's just say your course handicap is 10. That means you're going to get one stroke on stroke index holes 1 through 10, and on those holes your max score is double bogey plus one stroke. So your max score on those holes for handicap purposes would be a triple bogey. On holes with stroke index 11 through 18, your max is just a double bogey.
So we already talked about this a little bit, but what's the reasoning for basing the handicap index on potential instead of average?
There's a good reason for a handicap not being based on average and instead being based on potential or on demonstrated ability. If we did look at it at an average, it would actually reward the inconsistent player. The system is really about reflecting what a golfer is truly capable of when they're playing well and providing for equity when competing against others.
So yeah, it rewards a little bit in a way the consistent player.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Now moving on to our next question. One of the coolest things that we've kind of heard about the handicap index calculation is that it takes into consideration how golfers play on like a specific course on that specific day. So like, for example, if it's a really windy day, kind of poor conditions, it'll take into that consideration. And we just kind of wanted to ask, is that true? And if so, how exactly does that work and get calculated into that handicap index for that day?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the more popular topics within the rules of handicapping. It's actually called playing conditions calculation. So the short answer is yes. We've got a feature built in. How it works, at the end of each day, the actual scores that are posted by golfers are compared to the expected scores based on each player's handicap index. So essentially, for every handicap index, whether that's a plus 2.2 or a 12.5 or a 30.3, there's a fairly conservative range of scores. What we're looking at is there's a significant number of times where scores are coming in above that range or below that range. Let's just say a lot of scores that are coming in above that range, it essentially means that the golf course played more difficult than its course rating and slope rating. If a lot of scores are coming in below that range, it means that something was going on the course that day that made the golf course played easier. When there is a PCC adjustment, it actually gets built into the score differential calculation that I mentioned earlier. Again, just to make sure that that score differential represents how the golfer performed on that day. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about it is that it's purely about weather. Weather certainly plays a role in it, but it really also can factor in things like course conditions, like soft fairways or greens. It can factor in course setup, tee marker positions, rough height, hole locations, all those things that can impact the difficulty of the golf course. Not just weather, and that adjustment can either reflect a more difficult course or it can reflect an easier course. And the last point that I'd make about PCC, this is a bit of a plea for help, if you will, is that the more scores that are posted on the day of play the better the calculation is. So it looks, like I mentioned earlier, it looks at all the scores that are posted on the course for a particular day. If golfers wait a day or two to post their score, or certainly don't post them at all, it kind of minimizes the value of that calculation, and certainly takes away from how accurate it truly can be. So the plea is, if you play golf, if it's an acceptable format, post that score, whether it was a good score, an okay score, or a really bad score. Get it in there, because it's going to serve your neighbor, if you will, and making sure that PCC is based on the absolute best data that's out there.
I guess a little side question based off that, is there like a criteria then in order for that PCC to come into play? Like, is there X amount of golfers that needed to have played that course that day, or is it kind of just more of judgment based, or is there like specific criteria thresholds for that?
Yeah, it's based on scores that are posted on the day, and we need at least 8 scores posted for a course on a particular day in order to even be eligible for the calculation to run. We look at golfers that have a handicap index of 36 and below that can contribute towards the playing conditions calculation. We just see a bit more volatility in scores with golfers that are above that 36 handicap. But that's really it. I mean, it's purely data driven. Those are really what's going to drive whether a golf course plays harder or easier than its ratings. It's purely based on the scoring data that comes in for a given day.
Perfect. Okay. To continue moving on, and we already hinted a little bit about this, like Jock was referring to earlier, we get so many comments that you can't post 9-hole scores. It's like, you need to do 18, you need to do 18. That's just constantly what we're seeing. So we wanted to officially ask you, can you post 9-hole scores for that to be considered for your handicap index calculation?
100% yes. 9-hole scores are acceptable. They are legitimate rounds of golf. They provide really good information about your playing ability. And this is not new. Even going back to the USGA handicap system prior to 2020, 9-hole scores were acceptable. There's no question that popularity of 9-hole rounds has really taken off. I actually looked at some data on this, and in 2024, over 14 million 9-hole scores were posted in the U.S., and that's a 39% increase since 2020. Golfers are time-strapped. I mean, people obviously are working and they have families and even limited time that's available on the weekend. So these shorter forms of play, whether it's a 9-hole course or a shorter par 3 course, or if it's just playing as many as you can before dark, these are things that are certainly more popular these days. I'll just add one more thing about 9-hole scores, is that we did have a change with the way we treat 9-hole scores in 2024. Now when a golfer posts a 9-hole score, it actually counts towards your handicap index right away. So no longer do you have to wait for it to combine with another 9-hole score, which could be days or weeks apart. It actually counts towards your handicap index the very next day.
All this is so wild to me, because we get so many comments every single day saying, because we post these 9-hole rounds on TikTok and Instagram, they're like, that's not a legitimate score, it doesn't count. And it's interesting to hear from you that like, it has always been legitimate to be able to post 9-hole scores. I knew they got combined in the past. I didn't know that changed. So basically, like the USGA saying, hey, we are treating this as an individual round, basically.
You're spot on with that.
It's interesting, because I think I get some people's points, because obviously it's easier to shoot a lower score. If you would boil it down, if one hole was a round, yeah, it's easy to get like an even, like it's a lot easier to get even par on one hole than it is to get on 9.
Yeah, it's easier to shoot 36 than it is 72, basically.
Yes.
I agree with that. And it actually speaks to some of the issues that we found with combining 9-hole scores. I think there's a lot of positives with it. One thing is really easy to explain, combining 9-hole rounds. You shot 36 on Wednesday and you shot 40 on Saturday, so that goes in as a 76 into your scoring record. One of the things that we found is, I think to the points that you guys are making, is it was very dependent on the order in which 9-hole scores were combined. We would see these scenarios where, the golfer goes out on a Wednesday after work and shoots a 36 and then doesn't play another 9-hole round for like 5 weeks and post another 36. So that gets combined, you get a 72, and let's just say the score differential comes out to 0.5 score differential. That is not only being calculated towards my handicap index, but it is so much better than any 18 hole that I've shot and I've posted. So basically what they're saying is like, I can play that well over 9 holes, and I did on 2 different occasions, but I've never shown the ability to do that over 18 consecutive holes. That would have the impact of sort of artificially lowering a golfer's handicap index. But just that order of combining, when you've got just created more volatility than we were comfortable with. I think for us, it's, yes, the combining of the 2 different 9-hole scores probably is easy to explain, but ultimately for the WHS and with the USGA looking at it, it's like, let's provide something that's not only more responsive for golfers, but also is more consistent.
So that problem still exists basically, where like my best on a 18-hole round, let's say, is +1, but I've had a couple 9 holes that have been under. If I post a -1 on 9 holes with the differential calculation, that's still going to be better than any 18-hole round that I've shot, but it's just impossible to avoid if you're going to include 9-hole rounds.
To an extent, that's right. But the way that we are treating 9-hole scores now is it's using your handicap index on the day of play, so that you're not getting a score differential that is, perhaps too low. So what we're doing is, to your point, we're calculating a 9-hole score differential for those 9 holes that you played, and then we are attaching to that a 9-hole expected score differential that is based on your handicap index.
So it incorporates like what would happen over an 18-hole round, basically. So like we said, it is harder to score over 18 holes, but when you post a 9-hole score, it is incorporating that fact as it calculates, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of the 9 holes that we just talked about, what about 9 holes on a par 3 course? Wasn't there a recent change to allow scores on those shorter length courses to be included in your handicap index calculation?
Yeah, there was. So one of the other major updates with the 2024 revision of the WHS was a change to the minimum course length required for a course rating and a slope rating. So now the minimums are 750 yards for 9 holes and 1,500 yards for 18 holes. And so really what that means is that you have a lot of par 3 courses that are now eligible for a course rating and slope rating, whereas in 2023 and before that they weren't. So that's been a really positive change. We're seeing an impact already since early 2024. AGAs around the country have rated around 400 of these newly eligible courses, and we've seen 300,000 scores posted to these courses. As far as benefits to this, I mean, it counts towards a golfer's handicap index, but it's really great for beginners or players who are not hitting the ball as far to be able to keep getting and maintaining a handicap. It also reflects the growing popularity of shorter courses, and even courses that are adding additional shorter tees. So overall, it's a move toward making the game more welcoming, making handicapping more accessible for everyone.
All right, well, that was good to know. But one of our last questions here is, what is the purpose of an off season and like not being able to post scores during this off season?
Yeah, so inactive seasons are in place really, in short, to avoid inaccurate handicaps or distorting handicaps. Many states in the northern half of the U.S. have these inactive seasons during winter months, and it's really due to the fact that a lot of the courses in these areas, find it difficult to maintain normal playing conditions. And handicaps really are based on normal conditions. When a golf association goes out and rates a course for its difficulty to get that course rating and slope rating that we talked about earlier, they're rating under normal mid-season conditions. But regardless, it's in place just to make sure to protect the golfer, protect their handicap index, and make sure they don't go into that next active season, that next golf season, with a handicap index that really doesn't represent their game.
I guess just one side question based off that off-season talk would be we live in Michigan currently, but I'm from Florida originally. So for us, when it's winter in Michigan and it's the off-season, we'll go to Florida occasionally to film some rounds and get some rounds in. So would those rounds that we post in Florida be eligible to be calculated into our handicap index, even though it's the off season in Michigan?
Yeah, they would. So it's based on the active season where you are playing, and not the active season of where you're handicap is issued. If you travel down to Florida in December or January and play, definitely post that score. I mean, golf is booming in Florida in January, so definitely post that score. And I grew up in Louisiana, did not even know what an active season was until 10 or 12 years ago, because we could play golf year round. So absolutely, it's based on where the round is played.
Well, I guess that was kind of the end of our questions. I guess before we wrap up, do you have anything else that's kind of on your mind that you'd like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I was given some thought to this, and as far as in the spirit of myth busting, the myths that we sometimes hear are certainly related to the calculation of a handicap index and some of the procedures that are involved in the rules of handicapping. But honestly, a lot of times it's about the reasons that people have for not establishing a handicap index. And look, I'll give a couple of examples of that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the golfer's choice as to whether they want to get a handicap index or not. But hopefully a couple of these points that I'll make will perhaps make it a bit more appealing. One, as we hear, I think the number one reason people don't get a handicap index is they'll say, I don't compete. But in reality, most golfers do not compete in the traditional sense. I was looking at the data here as well. In 2024, only about 25% of golfers with a handicap index posted a competition score last year. And if you look at golfers who established a handicap for the first time in 2024, that value actually goes below 10%. So your newer golfers are obviously playing less formal terms. So really the takeaway here is that a handicap index isn't just for tournaments. It's a great tool for casual rounds too. Like the three of us could go out and play, and it could be for bragging rights. It could be for lunch. So it doesn't have to be something where there's a committee in place and trophies being handed out, etc. So that's one. The second reason that we hear is that I'm not good enough to have a handicap index. And that one to me is always interesting, because the whole point of handicapping is to level the playing field. It is designed for golfers of all skill levels, is to allow that +2 and that 22 or 32 to go out and have a fun and fair game with each other. I would say the handicap system really is for everyone, but like not all of us are good enough to go out and play in a state amateur championship or in a USGA championship. The handicap system is a way, especially for the mid to higher handicap golfers, to go out and have these, whether they're net competitions or just formal games, a way to go out and have a fair match. But one more piece of data is that, first off, the max handicap index is a 54.0. So it really is like if you're out playing golf and are keeping up with how many strokes you're taking, you can get a handicap index and you can have a number that represents your game. And if you're a beginner and you're starting at 54 or close to that, what an awesome way to see that number drop over time. It's such a cool feeling to see to go from a 50 to a 40 to a 30, etc. But also over 70% of golfers have double digit handicaps. So it's, golf, I've said it a couple times already, but golf is a hard game, and most of us are just trying to shoot in the 90s. Like shooting in the 80s and 70s, that's kind of a rare feat if you're looking at all the people that are out playing and posting their scores.
All right, guys, and that's it for today's video. Make sure to sign up for a handicap index by going to usga.org/get a handicap.